Hello, Station North 9th graders. This is Mr. Abernathy, poetry lecture number 5, I believe. We've done The Road Not Taken, What's the Matter Here by Papa's Waltz, and of course, Mr. Abernathy's favorite, On My First Son. Much more difficult poem, much more challenging. It's longer, it's more modern, contemporary. It's Daddy by Sylvia Plath. It will be paired with On My First Son. Both poems are an example of apostrophe, where in On My First Son we have an adult parent looking back on the passing of a child. In Daddy we have an adult speaker examining a very complex relationship, perhaps a psychological relationship with a deceased parent. Daddy has got a bunch of different literary terms, and some people might identify some things differently than me if you look at any other online sources. We're going to go with what I've got. The first and most important thing, as I said, is apostrophe. See my definition of On My First Son. It's confessional poetry. It's very, very modern, actually neo-modern technique. It's the speaker, the poet, reveals intense personal experiences on issues that before the modern era, certainly before the 1950s and 60s, might have been considered taboo or very, very embarrassing. Things like mental health, mental illness, divorce, sexuality, suicide. Okay? It's often autobiographical. There are some parts of Sylvia Plath's Daddy that don't match up with her autobiography exactly, or her biography exactly, but still interesting to examine nonetheless. Obviously, the language can be very disturbing for a lot of us. Contains a number of allusions or metaphors, if you want to call them symbols, I'm okay with that. It's the speaker has her father compared to a number of different, very unflattering examples. One point, we start off, the father, you can see a lot of the language of the Holocaust and of World War II. A father's compared to a Nazi. He's compared to a vampire and a devil. Inside that devil and vampire comparison, a husband is introduced, kind of a surrogate symbol for the father, that intensely damaging relationship in the speaker's life. We also have to deal with the rhyme scheme, the repetition of the ooh sounds. It sounds almost like a nursery rhyme. You do not do anymore, black shoe that I have lived like, in which I have lived like a foot for 30 years, poor and white, barely breathe, daring to breathe, or achoo. Do, shoe, and achoo. It's got a nursery rhyme kind of feel. It even has an allusion there to the nursery rhyme, there was an old woman who lived in a shoe. All of that leads to irony. Okay, a lot of those phrases and even the title of the poem, Daddy, is ironic. It would seem to be a happy, upbeat, again, almost childish kind of poem, when in reality it's dealing with an intensely difficult, intensely damaging subject. The speaker does not have a warm, close relationship. You know, wouldn't be calling this person Daddy, if you will. Of course, on my website you have a link to a YouTube page where you can hear Sylvia Plath read this herself, and it's an incredibly small amount of time from when she writes it to when the poor woman takes her own life. Miss Plath commits suicide, and then the collection Ariel is published. It's all within 5 or 6 months. She has a very, very difficult winter where she says she does a lot of the writing for Ariel. All gets done, all the editing gets done, and it's sent off to publication. She does a few poetry readings, and that's where we get these different recordings of Miss Plath reading. It's 16 5-line stanzas, which I don't have down here. That's of course a quintain or a quinette. It just, again, serves as a complete juxtaposition to On My First Son, which is very, very heartfelt and emotional and passionate. There's also heartfelt and emotional, but it's a very damaging relationship. Again, irony. Title of the poem, Daddy, and one of the last words you have in there is Daddy, you bastard. Obviously, it's not a warm relationship. This is a relationship that obviously had some serious, serious flaws. I'll make some points on the document camera in a second, but again, the biography doesn't match up completely. Otto Plath, her dad, dies when she's 8, not when she's 10, and by all accounts, he's a very quiet, reticent man. He might have loved Germany, his home, from when he was up until he was 15. He immigrates to the United States, and of course, the rising anti-German sentiment before World War II. He dies in 1940. He was investigated by the FBI. Because he loves his country, does it mean he was a Nazi? Don't know. We don't know. But a lot of other biographical elements. Talks about the failed marriage. After 7 years, she was married to poet Ted Hughes. A lot of accusations there that he had abused her both emotionally, mentally, and physically. So, That's Daddy by Sylvia Plath. Obviously. What's up, my 9th graders? This is Mr. Abernathy, back here with the document camera. Up at the top of the whiteboard, we've got the definition of quinette, quintain. It's a 5-line stanza of poetry. So let's just see what we got. You do not do, you do not do. So there's the repeated ooh sounds. Black shoe, there's a chew. Come up again, here's to, you. Down here lower at the bottom. Okay, again, it's kind of this, I've seen a lot of websites will say this sing-song quality, this nursery rhyme quality to the language. And it's, again, it's a part of irony along with the title. It's a very serious poem on a very serious subject. Obviously, the speaker does not feel very affectionate towards their father, but it's part of the juxtaposition, part of the irony that they're using here to make their point. Which I have lived like black shoe, in which I have lived like a foot for 30 years. So I've been trapped. I've been trapped in this situation. I've been trapped in these feelings that I have about my father, about a relationship that I had. And it goes back again to the nursery rhyme, there was an old woman who lived in a shoe. Daddy, I've had to kill you. You died before I had time. The father's passed away, deceased. And now perhaps the speaker is making a point that I have to end this relationship. I've got to finalize this relationship. There's something was wrong. I was missing something in my youth, perhaps because my father had passed away, and now I've got to come to psychological terms with it. I used to pray to recover you. Akdu means goodbye, I believe, in German. In the German tongue, in the Polish town, scrapped flat by the roller of wars. Of course, in World War II, Poland suffered a lot of devastation, not just to its infrastructure, but of course even to its natural landscape. The German army initially in 1939 invading over the Polish border, and then come 1945, 44, the Russian army coming back in the other direction to push Germany back to its borders. Communication is an important aspect of this poem. Communication. I said there were a dozen or two talking about the towns where her father seemed to be from, so I never could tell where you put your foot, your root. I could never talk to you. The tongue stuck in my jaw. It's stuck in a barbed wire snare. Maybe one of the first direct Holocaust images. Think of a concentration camp being surrounded by barbed wire, but also here communication's been cut off. I couldn't talk. My tongue wouldn't work. I thought every German was you, the language obscene, like an engine, chuffing me off like a Jew. Just the minimal Google searches will tell you that Dachau, Auschwitz, and Belsen are, of course, not just concentration camps, but death camps. The snows of the Tyrol and the clear beer of Vienna. That's a mountain range. And Vienna, of course, is in Austria. Adolf Hitler was actually Austrian by birth. He was not German, he was Austrian, and fought for the German army in World War I. Pure or true, he's making a point here, reference to the Aryan philosophy about pure-blooded Germans being the pure race. Blonde hair, blue eyes, 6 feet tall, all that stuff. All the stuff, oddly enough, that Hitler was not. With my gypsy ancestress and my weird luck and my tarot pack. Gypsy is known for telling fortunes, being able to read the tarot cards. Gypsies, along with Jews, were targeted for extermination, as they were considered to be an inferior race, and Hitler was out to exterminate them as well if he could. More Holocaust imagery. Your Luftwaffe. The Luftwaffe was the German Air Force. They really controlled the skies there above Europe. Your neat mustache and your Aryan eye, bright blue. Going back to that idea that this is all not pure. There's something also maybe perhaps impure about our relationship. Panzerman, oh you. Panzers were the tanks of the German army. A swastika, of course, was the symbol of the Nazi party. Nazi symbol. Every woman adores a fascist, the boot in the face, the brute heart of a brute like you. Fascist party was the right-wing party of Italy and Benito Mussolini, Italian political party. You stand at the blackboard, Daddy, in the picture I have of you. Her father was, in fact, a teacher. Taught German and section of biology related to bees. He was an expert on bees. A cleft in your chin instead of your foot. Who is known for having cleft feet? The reference here now that her father has not become not just a Nazi, but the devil, Satan, okay? But no less a devil for that. No, not any less the black man who bit my pretty red heart in two. Okay. Again, I've suffered some sort of psychological, some sort of emotional damage because of this relationship I've had. I was 10 when they tried to bury you. Father passes away when the speaker is 10. In Sylvia Plath's real life, she was 8 when her father died. At 20, I tried to die. Talks about a suicide attempt. There we go. I thought even the bones would do. They pulled me out of the sack and they stuck me together with glue. Talks about going through some sort of rehab or psychoanalysis. She does. She goes through therapy for a long time. She maintains a incredibly close relationship with her therapist, even when she meets Ted Hughes and moves to Europe, moves to England. She still keeps a running correspondence. No emails back then. It's real, actual live letters. And Sylvia Plath's collected letters have been sold at auction a couple different times, and different people have come up with them. People are really interested in what Sylvia was going through, Ms. Plath was going through in those final months of her life. And I knew what I had to do. I made a model of you, a man in black with a Mein Kampf look. Mein Kampf was Hitler's biography that he wrote in prison in the late 20s, early 30s. But this is also the place where he outlines his Aryan philosophy that became so instrumental and such a cause of such great horror and suffering in the world. And a love of the rack and the screw. And I said, I do. She gets married. So somewhere in here, the father's replaced with a husband. Ben Jonson was the first poet laureate of England. Sylvia Plath's husband, Ted Hughes, was also, centuries later, also one of the poet laureates of England. He held that position for 9 years. So, Daddy, I'm finally through. The black telephone's off at the root. Again, communication is cut off. There's a hazard here to communication. Telephone is off at the root. They've pulled the wires. There's no way for us to get through to one another. There's no way for us to resolve this. Communication, that says. The voices just can't worm through. If I've killed one man, I've killed two. The vampire who said he was you and drank my blood. So we've gone from Holocaust imagery to Satan, devil, and now he's this monster out of a 1930s movie. Okay, he's a vampire. These are all the different illusions. Let's call them illusions. I don't care if you want to call them metaphors, you want to call them images, go right ahead. I don't care. 7 years if you want to know. Daddy, you can lie back now. There's a stake in your fat black heart, and the villagers never liked you. You get this idea of the villagers storming the castle in a Frankenstein or a Dracula movie. They're dancing and stamping on you. You imagine them having torches and pitchforks. So something has finally happened. She's come to terms. She's found the speaker has found a way to deal with these two relationships, perhaps unresolved issues in a parental relationship, and then some sort of issue also here with another male figure in her life, a husband. They always knew it was you. Daddy, you bastard. I'm through. Call someone daddy and then call them a bastard. Again, another example of irony. Okay? Tough poem. Tough poem. I would love my friend Ms. Ogazalik to somehow teach this to her psychology classes and see what she comes up with. Fortunately, you can't take Ms. Ogazalik's class until you're a junior or a senior. She teaches the AP psychology class. She's our sponsor today. Thank you, Ms. Ogazalik, for helping sponsor our 9th grade poetry lesson for the day. That's all Mr. Abernethy has about this very complex, very disturbing poem. It pairs with On My First Son, whereas On My First Son is a positive, although heartfelt, passionate goodbye of an adult parent to a deceased child. Daddy is obviously an adult speaker's attempt to come to terms with some sort of broken relationship with an adult parent or adults in their lives, male figures in their lives. Both apostrophes.